Fitz of Writing.
Welcome to the Fitz of Writing. I am your host this episode, R.M. Johnson. Our guest tonight, this evening, this morning, or whatever time zone you find yourself in, he is a bit of a mystery to me, but I have no doubt that that mystery will be unraveled here in short order. So, scribbles and scratches of the departed pen, we at the Fitz of Writing, for your creative edification and entertainment, we bring you yet another sacrifice to the most wicked altar that we call the internet. Our tribute's name, James Ryan. Welcome to the show, James. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate you having me on here. It's a pleasure to see you.
Well, it's good. It's good to meet you. We definitely have talked a bit back and forth via our email since you submitted. I would like to say something. For those that don't know, we ask people to submit things, and part of that is like giving us a bit of your personality, just who you are, and we ask some weird things. And one of them is just to give us a quote that you like or that you feel kind of resonates with you. And James provided a quote by Bruce Cockburn. You got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. I love that quote. It's a great quote. What does it
Thank
mean
you.
to you?
Well, it basically means that in the face of all sorts of adversity, no matter how bad it gets, you have to keep fighting. And that's true regardless of your situation. Whether it's small scale or large, the only way out is to stand up to it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a mantra for life for anyone trying to get into the writing game. It's it's a merciless business. It'll beat you down. Um, you'll beat yourself down most of the time. But
Mhm.
James does have a few things that he's got done already. A bunch of stuff, a long list. You can definitely find it on his link tree. But the three things I want to talk about today are Red Jenny and the Pirates of Buffalo, Raging Gale, which is a long form narrative that you told over. How often were you releasing chapters on that?
Well, I'm trying to release 2 chapters a week, much as I did when it was in its written format years ago.
All right.
Um, when I had done Red Jenny originally, uh, at that point, Kindle was not actually a software; it was a piece of hardware,
Oh wow.
and everything was just brand new at that point. And it was an inspiration for me to try and work with that medium. And I had a story about pirates, which, considering that these were individuals who had decided that the rules no longer applied to them, I figured, what better way to try and explore this than by trying to go outside the normal printing parameters that we found a number of decades ago. So now I decided to revisit it again. Now that it's allowing me the chance to actually do this in an audible format. So I'm taking each individual chapter as I had done it, um, and am now releasing it at the same rate I was doing the other one, 2 chapters a week. At which is interesting because a couple of things that you didn't have to worry about when it was just writing, but you do when it's audible. Like, do you pronounce your French properly? Can you carry the tune for the lyrics that you're using? Uh, it's it's fun exploring new media. I'll tell you that.
And you're doing so you're transferring everything from written form into audible form
Right.
yourself.
I'm
You're
basically doing.
doing all the talking and stuff.
Mhm.
Oh
Yes,
wow.
I'm doing readings of it as it's basically audio through YouTube. I don't have enough graphics, although in a couple of years, if that happens, Raging Gale, the animated movie, might possibly show up before I'm 70.
Hey, it's good to have life goals, but you also have a more current piece that you're excited to talk about today called "Statues to Silence."
Yes, that was my first professional sale of a novel.
Oh,
Um, I decided to go the more traditional route with that one and found a publisher who was willing to take a chance with me. Golden Storyline Books in London. This is kind of, in addition to being more of a traditional thing, it allowed me to do a number of stuff that I had not done before. Um, the big issue with this one was because it was done in the form of a mystery, and trying to write a proper mystery is a much different set of skills than you might find otherwise. Because it's a matter of not only just what's the story I want to tell, but what's happening simultaneously with this. Since you've got your detective who's trying to figure things out, in this case, an amateur, a college student who seems to be the only one who's concerned that her classmates are disappearing and nobody seems to care. And you've got the villain of the piece who's in the process of disappearing all of these women and trying to set up. It's the first time I think I've ever said, wow, Excel is really good for writing a novel.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all got to find our own ways to keep track of stuff. I have an epic fantasy I'm working on, and I probably have 6 or 7 different mediums of notes. Like I've
Mm,
used World Anvil. I have a folder around with a bunch of information on it. Um, I've tried. I've actually like this is well. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but let's just say there's a multitude of mediums, not just written form, but like visual form, in which I have cataloged images or character
mm,
studies or plots and names and places and times for this giant thing. And I'm just like, I have got to get more organized and find like a singular avenue for to keep all this stuff in. um
yeah.
I do want to backtrack just a smidge. We'll definitely get into all that. So when you submitted, you provided very little personal information. Is that because you're a person like me who just doesn't like talking about themselves, and you wanted us to focus more on the pieces you were submitting?
Um, I think it's more so because I don't know. I'm one of the worst people in order to say, did I do anything that people really want to hear about? And I'm engaging a lot more on the creative side, having spent the vast majority of my time on the other end of the process. I spent about 30 years in rights management in publishing and television.
Oh wow,
So,
that's an interesting fact.
well, I mean, basically, I'm the person who said, I mean, you've got people out there who say, "Oh, I want to be creative and do this," and in some cases, people stepped over the line, and I was the guy who had to write the C&D notes to send to YouTube to say, "Get them off." So I just,
Hey, that's interesting. I mean, I struggle to tell people. Like I used to work at a physics lab, and I tell people that, and then I have to like caveat and go, I didn't do anything important. But
yeah,
I also have to look back and realize, so all I did there was I was part of a the what we called the copy center. So everything that ran through paper or needed printed came through us. So we were printing theses, we were doing all this important stuff for scientific means, especially so they could publish and stuff like that. But in the course of that time, I've met governors, I've met 2 presidents. Um, I helped organize multiple theses so that these guys could, or guys and gals could, get their stuff submitted properly, and that it was, looking good so that it's in their benefit. And so,
mm,
and I've met people from all over the world there. And, in 10 years, you can meet a lot of people coming and going through that world. So I do have to like personally just kind of realize, like, just because I may not think that it's interesting, um it probably is. And so like talking with you, you seem like a guy that's very much like me. Like you have it, I mean, it sounds like it already. Like you have a breadth of experiences, but you're just not like,
yeah.
it's not that
I mean,
important.
usually when somebody asks, the joke is, "I'm not a lawyer, but I played with one for TV." So, and yeah, I've been involved with a few business negotiations, a few issues that came up. I think the one thing I suppose that would probably be what the audience here might be most interested in is that there's a lot of talk about when you write in terms of who owns your right and the question of creative control and the term that was used in my industry, which I really hated, intellectual property. Makes it sound like something you put your sweat into is no more important than a widget. But
Yeah.
but having seen it from that side, I think the only thing I could say really that might be appealing since we're talking about process here is that you get an interesting perspective on your own work when you start looking at how the back room operates and the process that goes on there. And I suppose with that regards, I hadn't really thought about it before now, so thank you. But I suppose there is something to say for that does sort of tie into my stuff, if not directly, then certainly giving me a general framework and sense of where the universe is positioned.
Hmm. So I do have to get into the statues to silence. You use how do I word this? Petrification as a means of a horror device. It's a
Mhm.
means of killing, but it also is a means to instill fear. Uh, how did you come to that? Like, what's the origins of that, or is it subliminal messaging?
I,
Petrification
I,
to death.
I think I've always had some fascination with it since I was really young. Um, one of the one of the high points of Ovid's Metamorphosis is the piece about Perseus and the Gorgons, and that's always been. There's a lot of thematic elements that are involved in that. The whole sense, I mean, the original sense of how basically an individual can be just cut down uh, almost instantly just on sight, which admittedly 20th century we've done it pretty well, but back in the time of the Bronze Age that was something to think about. And then of course there's the other aspects that come out of that, the whole question of there's always been a certain amount of fascination and, and that's just historically as well as personally in terms of what happens when a person has become objectified literally. And
Hmm.
part of also the theme of this particular work is the whole sense of how people are being othered by those who don't really care, and they're just being reduced to objects that you can just not bother with. I mean, one of the original inspirations that came into this was when my son, who was going to McGill at the time, was made me aware of the movement that was going on in order to look for women who were indigenous who were disappearing into the system. And provincial governments in Saskatchewan and Manitoba really were not doing anything for that. And, sad to say, they're not the only two um, organizations that tend to do that. And I think also when the awareness of Me Too had come about and stories were coming about how people were being treated, it made sense uh, trying to take the themes of that and bringing it into this way with the whole story of the Gorgon and how individuals are just disappear and become othered and elsewhere. Uh,
Yeah, that is interesting. It kind of begs the question why it hasn't been used more often in horror medium. I mean, the symbolism there is
mhm,
it's written into it. Petrification,
yes.
to be afraid, to be
Mhm.
petrified. Um, and then yeah, like you mentioned, with it kind of being a thing of like objectification. We've turned you from a living thing to you are now an object. And
Mhm.
yeah, there's definitely some synapses in there that could be connected, and I'm surprised it hasn't been more often.
Well,
Um,
I think part of the problem, unfortunately, is that uh, the last time I think somebody really tried anything was Hammer Films, and they came out with a film called The Gorgon, and it was not the best approach to the whole thing.
I have
The
not
reason,
seen it. You'll have to inform me a little bit.
okay, it's 1965. Uh, it takes place in Germany at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century, and you have an individual who's an individual who discovers that there's a curse going around that people are being turned to stone, but it's only happening at midnight because you have one of the Gorgons who was not mentioned by Ovid at all, who only displays their power at a full moon and takes place in and resides in a haunted castle. And you've got Peter Cushing playing the doctor who's covering for it. And the person who's trying to figure it out calls in their ally, Christopher Lee. It's an interesting dynamic because Lee's the good guy in this one and Cushing's the bad guy, as opposed to usually the other way around.
Yeah.
And you sit down, and you look at it, and you say, "Are we looking at a were-gorgon?" They, they basic. I mean, I actually wrote about this, and I said, doing the movie in this way is a little bit like trying to find the best Giro that you can in Dusseldorf. They took something that has its own unique value and tried to shoehorn it into a gothic form, which works pretty well with vampires and werewolves, but doesn't quite work here.
Yeah, yeah. The Gorgon does not mesh well with the the were monster,
Mhm.
be it
No.
vampire, werewolf, or bear, or whatever were you want to find. Yeah, it's definitely a thing that should be its own. Like it shouldn't
Mhm.
be a half breed split between something.
Right. And that was part of the reason for the book here too, is that justice for Gorgons, I suppose I could with the hashtag in the middle
Yes,
of
yes.
it.
Let's start that. Let's start that hashtag justice for Gorgons. I like that. I'm actually. So I already created the. I think I created the ad for this. The release of this. I'm gonna change it now. It's gonna be hashtag justice for Gorgons. Um, do you want to get into the plot and the characters a little bit, or do you want to
I
leave
can
that for mystery?
no, I can give people enough plot before I hit the spoiler zone.
Okay.
Essentially, this takes place in the North Country, which is the part of upstate New York that's a lot further upstate than everybody. Let's put it this way: this is the part that you go a little bit to the north, you hit Ontario, and it takes place in a small town up there that has a women's liberal arts college. And normally there had been one or two disappearances among the students or people in town, like one or two a year, and people were just saying, who cares? And you've got one woman who's made aware of one of the disappearances. Her name is Eloise Guerrero, a college student who wants to be a creative writer, but also is trying her hand in journalism. And she gets involved um, when she hears about this one townie who disappears and meets with their family, and the father is absolutely distraught. So it touches her to go looking into it. At first, she's having problems because nobody seems to want to care, but for some reason, the disappearances are increasing, and suddenly the momentum is building up, and there are a lot more people who are disappearing at that point. It also doesn't help that while she's trying to look for this, she's also wondering, why are all these little stones, birds, squirrels, and rats being found in the forest? And ultimately, it comes together when she realizes that what she's up against. Um, Part of the problem is that she's trying to get to the bottom of something that nobody really seems to want to give her any help on. She has a couple of friends and some
Is it
people that,
is it disbelief, or is it just like they can't be
oh,
bothered kind of thing?
well, part of it's disbelief, part of it's apathy. Uh, we discover over the course of time that part of the reason for this is that there are interests that say disappearances. Oh, don't worry about them. I can convince you that there's nothing to worry about here. And as a result, so there's a certain amount of insulation from responsibility because they or those that are responsible for it, it's in their best interest to not do that. It's also part of the issue too is that she makes these intuitive leaps that there's definitely something going on here that's different, which is helpful because as things get more intense, it would be in her best interest to realize exactly what she's going up against. And ultimately, we get the mystery solved as well as a confrontation between the people who are trying to stop this and that which is wants to continue on keeping things exactly where they are in the same position like that.
Yeah, yeah, as though the situation itself is petrified. So
Mhm.
let me take you off of that because I don't want you to spoil anything. Let's move to Red Jenny. What as I understand it, based on the submission you gave, this is a pirate gang, we'll call them, that's like taken over Lake Erie, or they're
Well, it's set a few
managing.
years in the future. It's set a few years in the future. The climate crisis has changed things around a bit. The United States no longer works as well as it had. 4 years earlier, it lost a war to Canada when it tried to take over their side of the Great
So
Lakes.
this is fiction.
Yes. Oh, it is very much fiction.
This is 100% fiction. Okay.
Oh yeah. Although the way things are going, who knows for how long?
And is it like the kind of climate thing that we've all been indoctrinated with, or is it like a new type that you're
I
bringing up in
think
this subject?
I think a lot of people when they talk about when they had talked about climate change, were basically concentrating on areas that were getting more direct impacts, like coastlines getting flooded. Um, at the time this was written, this was a few years ago, Buffalo was considered a relatively safe spot in terms of not facing as many climate changes as they would have otherwise. Um, and so as a result, populations that had populations have moved in to the area, and because of the conflict that's been going on, it's gone from being a open border for the most part, at least it was at the time, to an active armed border for which there's a certain amount of tension that goes on. And people still want to interact, which is why you've got smuggling. And of course, we get smugglers, you always get pirates. And part of the part of it is to demonstrate how societies can change, in addition to just having temperatures going down. You have breakdowns of expectations and
Morality and stuff.
institutions that we have, and as a result, you've got people in Western New York who um, are actively living very close to a shooting zone at this point. And some of them, in order to adapt, they're trying to take advantage of it and make something better out of a bad situation that they have. Hence the piracy that goes
And so moving in, I mean that yeah, that sounds exciting. I do always love like what if stories, not
on.
necessarily that that's what this is, but it does have that vibe of like, hey, what if things just got bad? What if all the things that we were concerned about happened and
Mm-hmm.
happened hard, and how would we manage that? What would society
Right.
look after like? Yeah, I do enjoy those kinds of stories. Let me move you on to Raging Gale,
Mm-hmm.
because I really do want to talk to you about long long form narrative. I want to talk about the differences that you feel like you had as far as like writing a single story or even a trilogy versus like writing some. I don't know if you did write it chapter by chapter or if you were just releasing it that way. So I'd love to get into that with you. Like, what was your initial angle for releasing the
Well,
chapters?
initially, at the time, the technology suggested a certain number of restrictions, which was that each individual piece could not be more than 500 words.
Oh,
Because,
Jesus.
yeah, I mean, part of the reason for that was there were stories going around about people who were getting on the internet, and some people were experimenting with reading stuff on their phones, which at that point was flip phone.
Oh,
So there's
yeah.
only so much data you could insist at that point. I wasn't going to dump a whole book on somebody who's going to say, "I've got how many days for this to download now?"
Yeah, it's you don't think I don't at least I don't. You don't think about that kind of stuff today anymore of just
Yeah.
how difficult it had to have been because I mean I didn't really start my I didn't start taking my writing seriously until like when COVID hit. So like
Hmm.
we had plenty of technology at that time. But yeah, that's crazy. So you were releasing them at a time where smartphones didn't really exist
Yeah.
and you could
Don't
had
think
to do it at 500 characters or words.
words.
500 words. That's still not a lot of words.
No, no, it's. I've had a couple of people reading it afterwards said, if you ever put this together into one piece, you're going to have to cut a lot on this because the constant repeating on this. But then again, I mean, the fact that you the fact that you used to release serials in movies houses where you'd have 12 pieces, one being a week, and you had to sort of go back to the last scene and put it in at the beginning of the next piece, with one or two scenes changed to explain why the hero is still alive and keeping the story going. So putting it in a serial form like that uh, made a lot of sense at the time and still does. I'm finding that putting it in its new format, in the audio version, is the things that help keep everything tied together. That still applies here in terms of allowing for the story to move from one into the next.
What do you feel like are your favorite parts of either Statues to Silence, Red Jenny and the Pirates of Buffalo, or Raging Gale? Like, what is the part that you find the most interesting that you wrote?
Okay, going backwards chronologically from statues. Um, statues, I thought what was most interesting with that was trying to tell a story that had multiple moving parts to make sure each one moved together. You had Eloise, who was trying to get through her own mishigas as well as trying to solve the mystery. At the same time, at the same time, that she was going up against was had their own plans and frustrations that they had to deal with, and sometimes it clashed and sometimes it moved together. And I discovered as I was writing it that individuals who were going to end up uh, spending the rest of their life in a altered form of carbon entirely, uh, giving them a couple of moments so that in their last couple of minutes around, we get some sense of who these people were, and trying to make all of these moving parts work together. That was actually very satisfying and something I would definitely want to try and do again. I would like to do another. I would like to try and do another mystery slash gothic slash combo thereby. In terms of Red Jenny, there was a certain amount of world building that had to take place based upon extrapolation forward. And in the years since then, I've discovered that some of the stuff I had done did actually come through pretty well. I mean, the amount of coastline lost in New York City, um, by my calculations, was pretty close to what they actually lost in the book. On the other hand, I don't think anybody saw drone warfare that far back.
Wow, there's drones.
So well, I mean, the idea of using drones more so as an offensive wave capability as opposed to just individual searching. Because there's actually a couple of battles that are described that has a lot more people on the front line um, than you'd see today, especially after year or two of what's happened in Ukraine. But
And, and what
I've
would you
actually,
classify Red Jenny as? Is that I mean, clearly it's a post-apocalyptic story, but is that like, would you consider it sci-fi or?
uh, I think sci-fi. There was at one point the effort to call some fiction dealt with that cli-fi, climate change
Mm.
fiction, and it was popular for a while, and then a couple of people who were using it, they got ignored. I think one or two people were doing it were based around Vice, and when Vice went offline, that's they kind of lost some of the impetus right there. Um, Talking about extrapolations, one of the inspirations I had for Red Jenny, and I discuss it in the afterward, was that Rand Corporation had actually commissioned in 2006 a study of what happens with climate change and how Department of Defense had to adopt it. And one of the things they had was no regrets responses in the event something came up, and somebody who's spent most of their time, both sides of my family were from Buffalo, and I spent a lot of time both in Buffalo and North Country. And the idea that a border that I'd spent just about all of my time on Earth, seeing a very free thing suddenly becoming a zone of contest, I think that was the nightmare that ultimately inspired um, Red Jenny to come about. The whole idea of that.
And you may have to refresh my memory. What is a no regret?
A no regrets. Basically, they were discussing the idea that actions might have to be taken against actors on the stage that had been considered friendly. I mean, it was basically coded speak for yeah, they were your friends, but nah, you gotta stab them in the back
Oh wow, that's crazy.
now. Mm.
And so that wow, I that must have just slipped past my radar. So that was like a thing that we were openly discussing governmentally at that
Well,
time.
um, yes and no. I mean, the report came out; it was published. Uh, then a couple of years later, people tried to say, "Report what report?" And I've had to look for copies of the report to continually updating links every now and then.
Hmm.
I mean, first, the second Bush administration was trying to do their best to not deal with it, and then recently, with changes in Washington, shall we say, all the things I thought were safe links suddenly they were gone, so I had to go elsewhere. Internet Archive and other things in order to say this is the report that talks about that inspired the work.
Oh wow. Well, I mean, well, I don't want to dig.
No,
We could probably talk about that back and forth for a while,
oh no, of
but this is
course.
not a
We
political
only have
show.
so much time tonight, so
Yeah. So let's kind of just open it up.
sure.
I have my own personal thoughts on regarding long form narratives becoming traditionally published stories. I'd like to get your thoughts on it. What do you feel about that?
Well, uh, in terms of the stories we want to tell, ultimately, it's a matter of trying to figure out which which format works best for what you have. I mean, when I was doing statues, it was clearly going to be a novel from the very beginning. Um, Red Jenny, I think, initially started off as a short story or two, maybe a novella, and then ultimately expanded out into that. And I've had ideas since I said, you know, I could make a nice 3, 4 book plot about this. And then when I got to it, said, oh, this can be a flash fiction.
Yeah. I do want to that kind of leads me into like what is your preferred genre to write?
Uh, I don't really have a sense of genre. I think a lot of my stuff tends to go towards horror because that's usually where I tend to move. But in terms of strict genre, years ago, uh, I was given a book that impressed me. It was a collection of stories called "The Science Fictions of Jack London." Apparently, before he wanted to be Jack London wanted to be H.G. Wells, and
Hmm.
it actually puts them all chronologically. It's only about the eighth story that something gets set above the Arctic Circle. And it's only at that point where you start seeing that maybe that's where he starts going a little bit more towards the work that he is actually better known for. I think I tend to be more horror because it generally is a flavor I have. I was told years ago two things. One, if you can't write what you know, write at least what you feel. And the other thing I was told was, "Damn, you were one sick, messed up dude." so, so that's how I ended up there.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the same boat as you. I like to kind of dance around with different subject matters and genres. What elements do you feel like should, like, when you're writing? Let's say we'll take a genre and we'll just say sci-fi.
Okay.
When you're writing sci-fi, what elements do you feel like are essential to that story in order for you to sit back and go like, I wrote a sci-fi story?
Hmm, that's an interesting question. Um, I think one of the things that makes it a science fiction story is, are you taking something to ask the question, what if this occurs? And you're doing it in such a way that you're either extrapolating upon a something that we can rationally look at, or taking an idea that's that needs to be studied better. I mean, part of the problem, unfortunately, is that you've got the whole spectrum of science fiction to deal with. You've got your hard science fiction, uh, your your Andy Weirs, who are basically saying, if you put this is the formula you have to use in order to be able to move that along. And then you've got your soft science fictions and science fantasy, use the force, type of thing. And also the fact that within science fiction, there's been the whole contest between people who say science in science fiction has been one of the physical sciences. And you've got other people saying, well, what about the rest of us here? I think social sciences are important. And you get the hard science people to say, what? We gave you Ursula Le Guin. Can't you be happy with her? No, we want more than that. Thank you. Oh, it's
Yeah, it is a crazy balance that one genre kind of like gets split into three distinct categories, and then those categories can get split up further based on subgenre. So I do want to get back to the questions I had. I want to feel out what your interests are regarding storytelling, because we really do focus more on the narrative aspects of storytelling, and we kind of want to get everyone's feel on that. So I
right.
would like to know what elements, when you're writing, what elements you feel like are important to write about.
Well, um, I suppose one of the things I do is I try to discuss. Try and bring in larger issues. Um, I think I talked a lot about different issues with statues and individual freedom versus versus systems that are trying to clamp individuals down, and the whole question of cruelty and how much do you need to engage in order to get what you have to go do going forward. And it's we talked about the horror aspects involved. I mean, there's a lot of beheadings and limb cutoffs and shots to the chest and stuff, and that's just in the first third of the work. Uh,
Wow.
that,
A lot of death going on.
a lot of death, a lot of blood, a lot of cruelty, especially because unfortunately, piracy in the 17th century was not a business for gentlemen.
No, no, it wasn't. So, do you like to do you like to include death and like gruesomeness
I do
in
include a
all of your
lot of
stories?
I do include a lot of death and gruesomeness because I do discuss a lot of topics where that's highly prevalent. Um, I've written stories involving war. I have a piece out there that I'm trying to sell right now. It's gone to a couple of different markets, and I think it's being looked at, uh, which which actually describes the life in Kirkuk, which is a city about 15 clicks, excuse me, south of the Russian lines in Ukraine. I have there's very few kittens and puppies playing with rainbows in my stuff. But I mean that's an aspect that I've always leaned towards, and part of it is because when I'm trying to deal with there's a lot of topics I also deal with which are also a little heavy, and sometimes that involves a certain amount of pain.
Yeah. And so, what you're saying is we shouldn't expect a kids version of silent statues to silence anytime soon.
Never say never.
I like that attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I I actually somebody made me play a round of Clue Junior once upon a time, and if they can do that, I suppose there's a way.
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess that question kind of leads me into my next one here, which is when you're writing. Well, not even when you're writing, when you're reading or writing or just taking in any form of medium storytelling, be that uh,
Right.
through art or movies or reading. What elements do you feel like make a great story?
Uh, I think in terms of what's on the list that would make me say yes, I like this. Well, I think it has to be clever
Hmm.
because oftentimes, especially if I'm looking at mysteries that come up, and if I if I can figure it out, if I can figure out who did what long before the detective gets to it, I've basically lost my interest right there.
Well, that's a delicate thing you could do too, because I do think part of good mysteries, the reader is with you, and they're probably smart enough to be alongside your thinking. But Brandon Sanderson has a great quote regarding this, and I don't know if it's his or not, but that's where I heard it, which is um, inevitable but surprising.
Hmm.
Where it's like we know it's coming, we see the path, but we enjoy the ride, and then we get there and we're like, ah, yes, because I think we get satisfaction, especially with mysteries. We get satisfaction of being smart enough to solve it. But you also
Yeah.
don't want to like make it
Mhm.
so obvious that like by the time they get done with chapter 2, they're like, I don't know what
Mhm.
else I'm reading this for. So you do
Yeah.
have to kind of like give them the clues, but also like make it interesting so they hang in there. So it is a balance.
And even in cases where they don't, as long as the work is getting back to what's on the list, uh, clever turns, because sometimes language that actually, the language also has to be pretty clever, like a decent put down. A book by Randy Dawn that had just come out, and one character describes a complete bore. He says, "Oh, look, the ego has landed." I love that line.
That's good.
Absolutely.
That's a good line. The ego has landed.
So
That is
it's
clever. Yeah.
so clever dialogue, plot that's moves along and actually makes you have to stop and think for a little bit. I think I suppose if you wanted to give the short answer, something a little bit more cerebral, I think, that actually engages bits of me beyond just the central lane there. I'm looking for a whole sensory experience, I think.
And how, like, so when you're reading or
Mhm.
writing, how important is it for you to I guess like is a subjective word, but we're gonna stick with it. Like your characters, like enjoy them versus like where do you put more weight? Do you put more weight in the characters of your story or the story of your story?
Well, um, I've learned through experience that if you have characters that nobody cares about, no matter how interesting the plot, so yes, the characters have to be engaging. Um, I'd say engaging because you can have complete SOBs and MFs that are just that you still want to see. Okay, what happens to these people as they go along? Because I'm curious. They've got my attention. So I think to a large extent you do need a character that you're willing to follow along with, as well as having as well as putting them in a situation that makes you say, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, I've also learned that uh not it's not always the important stuff that makes that difference. Well, James, I've had a lot of fun. I think we're running out of time here. But I do want to let everyone know your socials. I'm going to give everyone a shout out to where they need to go to find your stuff. You can find them on Instagram at jdanryan. You can find them on Substack at jamesryanfiction.substack.com. And he has a bunch of other socials and things and websites that you can connect them through with him. If you go to his link tree, it's linktr.ee/jdanryan. Keep an eye out on our Facebook for any promotional stuff we release. That's where you're going to find out where our schedule for releasing the videos, any other updates just regarding my work or Sean's. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And James, is there anything else you want to cap off, mention before we let you go?
um, well, I wanted to just say it's been a lot of fun speaking with you, and I really you mentioned a couple of projects that you had, and I'm really pulling for you that those projects see the light of day. I mean, we all have to support each other on some level or such.
Well, I
And
do. I do have a short story. If you want to take a look at that, it's on Amazon. It's called
oh, great.
In Pursuit of Death. It was supposed to be the start of a series, but life hit, and I just kind of got away from it. But I'll probably get back to it, and it's like an anthology series of short stories. You'll get the concept when you start reading. It's kind of like a Twilight Zone-esque thing.
I'm looking forward to reading that. Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll see if I can send you a free copy of it. I mean, it's like $2 right now. It's nothing crazy, but if I can save you $2, I will. I'll, yeah, it's been a pleasure. I had a lot of fun. We definitely like to have you back on whenever you got more stuff to talk about.
I look forward to it.
I'm gonna go ahead and say let's fade to black.